Hi Savannah.
Hi Ryan.
What are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about the movie Cam. So first we do just want to give a quick thank you to our sponsors as well as our patrons. We do have some anonymous sponsors on this podcast. If you or anyone you know might be interested in sponsoring us, please hit us up. Our email is in our description of our podcast and our YouTube videos.
And again, we are still hosting our Pokemon card giveaway, so if you want to stay tuned to the end of the episode where you can find out the details, where I will give you a personal aura reading and send you a Pokemon card that matches your aura.
In today's episode, we will be discussing the movie Cam, which is a horror film that follows the life of a sex worker. So we do just want to give a quick little trigger warning for violence against sex workers. We won't be going into like tons of graphic detail necessarily, but just be forewarned so you know. We will also be linking a really great organization called Sex Workers Outreach Project, which is a really great organization that fights for the rights of sex workers and advocates for sex workers in different capacities. If you are interested in that as a cause, please check them out. Consider donating to them. Like I said, today we are discussing the movie Cam. So Cam came out in 2018 and it was directed by Dan Goldhaber. It was written by Issa Mazet, who based the story loosely on her own experience being a cam model, and she actually also wrote a memoir called Cam Girl. The screenplay for Cam did win the Best Screenplay at the Fantasia International Film Festival in 2018, which is also where the movie premiered. It is a co-production between Divide and Conquer, Blumhouse Productions, and Gunpowder and Sky. Blumhouse Productions notably does make a lot of horror movies amongst other types of movies. Some notable ones that they've also made are Paranormal Activity, The Purge, Get Out, The Invisible Man, tons of others. After it premiered at the Fantasia International Film Festival, it went straight to Netflix, and it seems as though it's gotten pretty good ratings since then. It does star Madeline Brewer. She's known from Orange is the New Black, The Handmaid's Tale, and Hustlers, and it's a pretty small cast and she really carries the film. Now that we've given a little bit of background on Cam, since we haven't talked about a horror movie yet, I would love to know, Ryan, what are your thoughts and feelings on horror movies broadly?
I mean, you know my thoughts and feelings on horror movies. I love horror movies. I love feeling scared. I love going to bed scared at night. I think it's a fun feeling overall. Yeah, no, I really enjoy it. And when I do feel scared, I think more and more you watch horror movies, you get kind of inoculated to the feeling. So it's always very refreshing when you find something that truly does frighten you. Yeah, love it. Love spooky. I love bodily horror specifically. So I love gore and like just things to do with the body. It's probably my top favorite type of horror.
What is your favorite horror movie?
You know, it's just changed a lot. When I was asked this question in my horror and film class, the answer that I gave was Saw 1, directed by Leigh Whannell. And I still really love Saw 1, but it's probably changed a little bit. I've been really enjoying Jordan Peele's latest films. I really loved Us. I've watched that a couple times now. So I don't know. I don't know, but probably still deep down in my heart, still Saw 1.
I also really love horror movies. I think you and I, Ryan, we really like grew up around horror movies, or at least we were exposed to a lot of them in our youth. And I think originally when I first started watching them, they definitely like scared me a lot to the point where I didn't like them, but I like forced myself to like them so I could like get along with people who also like them, which has now turned into an actual like appreciation for them. I think that my favorite horror movie, probably just like historically of all time, will probably always be The Shining. But in recent years, I've been really impressed with Ari Aster's movies like Hereditary and Midsommar. I was really blown away by both of those and I love them a lot.
I've seen Midsommar. I need to, I don't know. I know I need to. But we can give a brief synopsis of Cam. So it is about pretty much one cam girl and her experience in trying to climb the ranks of this site. Man, I can't remember the name of the site now.
It was Free Girls Live.
Free
FGL.
Girls Live, NGL. Anyways, it's about her trying to climb the ranks of her specific cam girl site. And as she's getting kind of closer and closer, breaking into the top 50, her identity gets co-opted by this doppelganger. And her account gets hacked, and it's about her trying to reclaim her account and reclaim her spot in the rankings. And there's like a couple of like family issues in there as well thrown in, some friend issues, but that's pretty much the gist of it. I'm unclear if it is supernatural or sci-fi. I think it was a little left up to interpretation, at least for me. So if you watched it, leave your thoughts down below on that one, because I am curious to hear. And I think we are probably heading into spoiler territory now.
I think that's fair to say. Thank you for that brief synopsis, Ryan.
No problem.
So as you mentioned, Ryan, you kind of felt conflicted about like what type of horror movie this is. And I would like to explore that a little bit, because I feel like this movie kind of touched on a lot of different genres within horror. The biggest one to me that really jumped out was like a techno horror / techno thriller, which I had never actually heard of those terms before. I always like knew that a word probably existed for this, for horror movies or thriller movies that have to do with technology in some way. And these specific terms of techno horror, techno thriller actually come from like books, and I just saw them being loosely used around movies as well. But a techno thriller is a hybrid genre drawing from science fiction, thrillers, spy fiction, action, and war novels, and the techno horror is a subgenre in that with just horror in place of science fiction. Some examples of some other techno horror movies are things like Videodrome, Existenz, One Missed Call, The Ring, Poltergeist. Some of those have like more hard elements of those, such as like Videodrome, where he's in this whole other world with the TV, or Existenz with going into a Matrix-like world of video games, or something like Poltergeist, where it's a young girl interacting with the paranormal through her television set. So I'm just kind of curious, Ryan, what do you feel about this genre of techno horror? Do you find it to be scary? Do you like it? What are your feelings about it?
I would probably rank it at some of my least favorite genre of horror. I don't even know if I would put Poltergeist there. I know the TV is involved, and that's like a big gimmick, and that did scare me, and it still does scare me. So when technology does fail and it gives you the blue screen, or it gives you the fuzzy like gray and black screen, that does still scare me to this day. In general, techno horror or digital horror doesn't really super thrill me, nor do I find it super engrossing. What does scare me though is I did try, I don't know if you've ever gotten an ad for this, Savanah, in those apps where you like do like a texting digital response horror story, you know, where it's like, are you home? No. Well, we're home. Someone's at the door. And like sometimes like an AI will take over your phone, or there's other genre breaking things like Undertale, where it'll glitch your computer, so it'll literally exit out the game, like the game's taking over your computer. And so you have to like physically reopen it, and like your save file can be tampered with. So things like that do scare me. But I think it has to be done in a weird kind of nuanced way to get me. How about you? I know you're, like you mentioned before, you were scared of horror movies in the beginning. You're still scared of horror movies now, so I know you're a bit more skittish.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that I'm skittish. So I really like this genre, and I do find them to be pretty scary. As you might recall from our episode on Feels Good Man, and we were talking about meme magic, I was afraid of the different forms of meme magic that I experienced as a child, and I feel like that definitely translates into techno horror movies as well. There's a lot of reasons why I find them scary, and I think maybe other people find them scary. I think one being just like technology for a lot of people just makes them feel uncomfortable because they're unfamiliar with it in general, whether that be somebody who doesn't understand how to use their computer and so it scares them. A lot of times our fear is just coming from things that we don't understand. So I think that's part of why people get scared of these types of things. To me, I feel like it's often scary because it feels real, like it feels like something that could actually happen to me. A lot of times if you're watching maybe like a paranormal story about ghosts, like maybe they become possessed because they were interacting with a Ouija board. That's something that I don't do because I am afraid of ghosts. But I do interact with my computer on a daily basis. And if there is some way for the paranormal to get to me through my computer, that would be scary to me. Because that's something that is very real and that I do every day.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how you would react if you were to play one of those games that like locked you out of your computer for a second or your save file. Like it's a little creepy. I think you would be a little wigged.
I think it would freak me out. I have played an app that was a Ouija board app. Which who knows what that was about, but that was scary to me. But I was also in like junior high when that happened. Anyways, another reason why I think that this genre is scary, and this might be a little out there, but I invite you to think about this with me, is that technology has a presence in our life. By presence, I would say that like it almost feels like it could be alive in some way. I don't know. Does that sound crazy to you, Ryan? Do you ever feel that technology could be alive around you?
It's not something that I think about on the day-to-day. But I think I have entertained that thought, yeah.
I think that there's something about how like technology, like my computer or my phone, is able to do so much, and so much that I don't understand, that it feels as though it is like a living presence, or that it's just like a figure in my life. I feel like there's been times when I've been like so involved with things with like my computer, for instance, that it feels like my computer is almost a person. Like if I get upset about something that's happening on my computer, I'm probably talking to my computer out loud, or any other form of technology. And I think part of that is obviously like I'm anthropomorphizing the objects in my life. But I don't know. I feel like the more and more that we become connected to technology, it feels like that would just be happening more and more. Or talking to Siri on our phone. It's like we're able to actually have a conversation almost with our cell phones.
Yeah, I think the thing that scares me most, more from technology and in that horror perspective, is the surveillance aspect of, like I have a sleep app, and I do have it set so that it sends like the sounds at night to like sleep analysts so that they can like take that data. Or even just my Google Home. I know that I'm probably being listened to, or like all my cameras at all times. You know, we've all seen what the government can do, and if the government can have it, anyone can have it. Or Snapchat leaks, or things like that are probably more what I think about on the day-to-day. But then I kind of got over that, and I've just kind of accepted my surveillance, and that's a part of the modern reality that we live in. And personally, it doesn't super bother me, but I know it does bother a lot of people, and of course I will fight for them tooth and nail, because I think privacy is deserved, and privacy is a right, but it doesn't actually personally bother me anymore.
It's just something that bothers me a lot, I would say. And that's one of the other reasons why I find it to be scary, is because, you know, a lot of times when people talk about feeling like there's ghosts around, like they feel like they're being watched, or they have this feeling of being watched. With technology, we are being watched a lot of the time. I'm one of those people who covers my webcams. I don't like giving access to like apps like you were saying, Ryan. I won't. My boyfriend has iHome. I won't let him put it in our bedroom or like other places in the house other than his office, because I don't want to be watched. And that freaks me out a lot, and I think is a really, really big problem. Another reason why that I think it's scary, and there's a really good article about this that I will link down below. Technology has always also just had like a connection to the paranormal, like ever since electricity was invented, people immediately were trying to see if they could like use it to contact the dead. Ghost hunting equipment is a lot of just other technologies that were used for other things that people now try to use for ghost hunting. There's also things like haunted websites, where supposedly you go to this website, you will get cursed or something if you go there. I remember, Ryan, one time you were telling me about a website that you found where you could sign the devil's book. Something like that. So there's things like that, or lots of the meme magic things that we've covered before. But then also, there's like creepypasta of stories that like kind of go along with that. I recall a creepypasta that I listen to. There's like some Legend of Zelda game, Majora's Mask. I think that's what it's called. I don't know. I've never played that game, but I listened to the creepypasta and I was so scared just even like imagining what happened to this person by playing that game. And then another like very real thing, if you don't believe in that stuff with technology, is how there is like almost living profiles in a way of people who have died. Like if you die, your Facebook profile remains, and sometimes people go and they will speak to these profiles, or it's basically just like another extension of your presence on the internet.
I think that dying now and having your social media trail behind you does definitely add to the performative aspect of dying, and it does a little bit bother me. I have very mixed feelings about people memorializing the digital stuff, specifically with Facebook pages. I think it's just kind of feels like, oh, like you didn't even really know this person and you're speaking over here. But on the other hand, I do see like genuine people, like mothers posting years later. And just when I think of it and go back to a page with someone who I know who's passed, and I see that there are some people that find genuine comfort in that the Facebook page is there, I obviously don't want to take that away from them. So it kind of mixed.
And then the last thing that I think is scary about technology and the internet is that along with all of this stuff, like of all of these like creepy, possibly not real or paranormal things that might go on within the internet, there's also just like actual horrific stuff that is really on the internet, on like the dark web and places like that. And just to like know that that's actually out there and that bad things really do happen, I think just like feeds the fire of that fear. So with all of that said, do you feel like this movie, Cam, Rian, fits within one of these type of techno horror movies?
Yes. I still don't know if it's paranormal or if it is like sci-fi horror. I mean, I understand like techno horror is like, I guess, kind of like a blend, and I understand it's its own thing, but it did make me feel uncomfortable that I couldn't easily identify if it was a paranormal doppelganger or a technological doppelganger. I'm more inclined to believe that it was like a techno type thing, just because, I mean, it felt like an extended episode of Black Mirror almost, and Black Mirror doesn't really deal with the paranormal, so it makes sense that the website would create a doppelganger so it would get more money, so that all the tips would be going to them. Like that is what is easily made to bridge in my mind. Did you experience the same kind of uncomfortableness when watching it, when you weren't able to, or maybe you were able to easily identify what it was? I'm not sure.
I think pretty much right from the beginning, I was pretty confident about what I thought it was going to be. But I think I still like was kind of unsure. I don't know. I want to get a little bit more into that and a little bit later. But yeah, we'll get more into that. Something that I think was kind of going for this movie is that it kind of combined like a lot of different elements together. So it had like this techno horror element. I think it had some elements of like a found footage style from like the cam perspective. In case you don't know what a cam girl is basically like live porn that happens on the internet where people can pay and tip people to watch them doing live porn, essentially, on camera. So this movie has some found footage style elements with the like interaction of the webcam and watching like the computer screen of her being on there. And I know that found footage movies can be pretty divisive amongst people about whether they like them or they hate them. I typically like them unless it's like really bad. This was a movie where I did like it. And I think that this genre in particular is interesting because with found footage movies, I feel like it's always like the camera becomes one of the characters in the movies, which I think is just interesting and I like. I don't know. Have you ever thought of it that way, Rian?
No. I don't think I have. I mean, usually there's like a camera person or they like set up the camera. I guess with Paranormal Activity, I could see how the camera could be its own entity and I would think about it as like a separate thing. But with this, I didn't. I also really didn't think of it as a found footage film, but I can see how you would think of it that way. I don't like found footage movies. I don't like them. I think they're kind of boring. And the shaky cam bothers me even when it's used in real movies when they don't have a found footage style and they use like the shaky cam. No. No.
I think that Paranormal Activity is a really great example of that, especially because of the way that it is. Like, a lot of times in Paranormal Activity, the camera is like on a tripod or it's like set up in a room, and it's like you're watching everything unfold from this other perspective. So it's almost like you are within the camera. Like, you and the camera are one, but the camera is also like another character. I don't know.
I also find it like extremely limiting. I don't like this feeling when I feel like I'm locked to the camera, and whatever the camera sees, it dictates my viewing experience, and it makes me feel locked in and like I can't move and I want to see more. And I know that's probably the intention. But I don't like that feeling. It makes me feel frustrated when I watch it.
Something that's kind of a callback to our previous episode where we were talking about Celeste and the medium is the message. I think that sometimes that can also be seen with found footage things, like, or specifically with cam, how it is from the perspective of the cam or like the web pages that we see. I think that kind of ties in with like the medium is the message idea.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. One thing I did want to mention really quick before we kind of move on is I love Blumhouse. I mean, I think they do a fantastic job of producing some like indie level, low budget, but like still really well thought out films. And they are credited with the popularization of the haunted house film, or the resurgence of the haunted house film, and bringing it back, just because they are low budget. So people are like, okay, we need one location to film. It's the haunted house. So they're kind of credited for bringing that terror back to Americans. And I think that it's fun that they have this movie, and I'm just curious what other digital horror movies they have out there to kind of bring that genre into the new age. Because if they could do this, I'm sure on a lower budget, then I'm excited to see how they continue on with pioneering into the genre.
Something that I like kind of with that, I like that genre with like the, what did you say, haunted house genre, is when there's a pretty small cast. Like, that was one of the things that I really liked about this movie, was how small the cast was. I'm always pretty impressed by movies like that. The last thing that I think is kind of an element of this movie is like the sex horror elements of it, which I also enjoy. Like, I really like the movie It Follows, and other movies that really combine like either sex and the paranormal or sex and horror in different ways. And I think that was just another element that was added into this movie just by the nature of it being about a cam girl.
Yeah, and one thing I did really appreciate is that they didn't brutalize any like sex parts, because I know that's a whole different kind of thing that real life people do. You think of the Black Dahlia and how like her breasts were cut off and like her vagina was mutilated, and like real life horror does center around brutalizing women's sexual organs, and I liked how they didn't take advantage of that, because that does make me genuinely a little bit uncomfortable. And I feel like that is there, if it is there, mostly in part for the pleasure of the male gaze. And that's coming from someone that likes bodily horror. Like, I love brutalization. So that's coming from me.
Yeah, agreed. And I think something that kind of lends to that is like all of the like graphic, and graphic I'd say loosely because it wasn't that graphic of a movie. All of those types of scenes were all self-inflicted, which was interesting. Well, I mean, the main character does experience like, I think, mental trauma, but it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like a reverse on what you would think would happen. So, as I said, I felt pretty confident about what I thought this movie was about. Although I did watch this movie twice. The first time I watched it with my boyfriend, he kind of disagreed about what he thought it was about. But I really felt like it was about deep fakes and how terrifying deep fakes are or can be. Are you familiar with what deep fakes are, Ryan?
I am familiar with the term, yeah. But like, I don't know if there's any like weird nuances to it.
So deepfakes, if you have never heard of what a deepfake is, it's essentially a video that is fake, that is faked by a person. It is created with different types of software that can emulate somebody's voice while also like emulating them moving. So where you can create a pretty convincing fake video of somebody doing insane things that they've never done before. And this really started to become a problem around 2017. I think that's about when I first learned about it. I listened to a really good episode of Radiolab that I will link below. That's where I first heard about them. And when I first heard about them, I was terrified because I was like, oh God, like one more thing we need to spread misinformation in the world so convincingly at that. And actually when I first heard about them, I heard them mostly talked about in the form of like fake news and creating fake news stories, or like politicians saying things that they've never said or doing things that they've never done before. But actually, the much bigger problem within the deepfake industry is deepfake porn specifically. In 2017, deepfake porn first emerged on the internet, or probably not first emerged, but like first became popular with a particular subreddit on Reddit. And in 2019, a Dutch cybersecurity company did estimate that 96% of all deepfakes in the world are pornographic at this time.
It's always porn. It always comes back to porn. Porn decides the world, I swear.
It really does. Obviously, this is a problem. It would be really awful to have this happen to anybody. Notably, this did happen to Daisy Ridley of Star Wars a few years ago, where they did create a deep fake pornographic video of her that went pretty viral, which is not good. And then moving further from that, in 2019, a company created a downloadable app called Deep Nude, which is specifically an app that can take a photo, and I don't exactly understand how this works, but somehow it erases the clothing from the photo to leave a naked body. And obviously it's not really erasing it, it's like transposing a naked body onto it, but it is convincing enough to look like it would be real. This app was then taken down off of platforms and like essentially banned, but several people have created free open source versions of the app since then, so people are still able to do that. Yeah, I was pretty convinced that this is what the movie was about. Did you think that at all, Ryan, when you were watching it?
No. I think you could watch this movie and not have any knowledge of what a deepfake is and still come away. I mean, obviously the movie's about identity theft, and I think you could, if you have like the background knowledge for like what a deepfake is, maybe you can draw that parallel, and maybe if you have it already on your brain, you could do that. But I don't think that term is necessary for the understanding of this movie.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think you could not know what that is and still be probably scared by the movie, or at least I think just like the feeling of like your identity being stolen in general.
I had mixed feelings about this movie, but what I came away from it like ultimately was it's about a girl who was on the internet so much that they finally had like enough footage of her to recreate this girl either paranormally or sci-fi-y technologically, and so they're like, we can get rid of her so we can, you know, she says this girl's taking all my money. And so I think it was more about that for me. And it was about her reclaiming her identity to be like, that will never be the real authentic self. And like, no matter how much of myself is put on the internet, I will always be me and I will always be better. And even when she at the end recreates like a new identity, that's still something different that she is staking in as her own, and that she is still authentic and you can never beat the authenticity. That's what I got.
I agree with that as being like the general message of the movie. Something else that I think the movie could have kind of been touching on was like the idea of, or not the idea, the unfortunate existence, the unfortunate existence of revenge porn in general. Obviously revenge porn is a huge issue. If you don't know what revenge porn is, it's essentially when somebody, either in this case maybe creates fake pornographic images of you or takes images of you without your consent that maybe you gave to them or something, and then like blasts it on the internet or gives it to other people without your consent or knowledge. This is a huge problem in general, apart from like the deep fake version of revenge porn. revenge porn just in general is like a huge problem. It was a major issue for Pornhub recently. There was an expose about the amount of revenge porn that they had on their website. And there is not a lot of recourse for people currently in the United States. I don't believe that there's any legislation necessarily protecting you if this happens. I do know in the UK they have some more legislation against it, and I believe they actually just passed that even if you just like threaten somebody with revenge porn, you can face litigation for that.
That's insane that we have no recourse. I mean, it's not insane, but like that's insane that there's pretty much no like automatic kind of slap on the wrist. Like, I understand you could probably like sue someone, I'm sure, for defamation maybe, but that's a massive invasion of someone's privacy. I mean, like cyber hacking, it should be on par with getting into someone's bank account.
Yeah, I think that usually when it like is brought to court, it tends to more err on the side of probably defamation, or if it is underage people in it, and child pornography charges. But kind of moving on from that back to this idea of kind of like a split identity. This movie does deal with a doppelganger of Lola in more than one way, I would say. I find doppelgangers to be scary. Do you, Ryan?
Yes, I do find them to be scary. I don't know, not that scary, but pretty scary. It's not something that I like keeps me awake at night as far as horror goes. But
I was just imagining you being like just so deeply afraid of you having a doppelganger that like you can't sleep.
I mean, like Jeepers Creepers kept me awake in bed thinking of my dreams being invaded, so it's not out of the question.
I do think that doppelgangers are scary. Like I said, like anytime that anybody has the ability to like infiltrate you and who you are and present as you to other people without your like ability to stop it, I think is just a really scary concept. Anytime. I mean, not just with things like this movie, but having your credit card hacked into or your Facebook account hacked into or anything like that, I think can spike fear into me at least. I think that part of what makes doppelgangers creepy is kind of like an uncanny valley kind of characteristic to them. Also, particularly in this movie, because the doppelganger that we see on the like webcam website that she's on, it is, I felt like not human, but I mean obviously it was a human because the actress was playing that person, but because in my mind I had seen her as being, I knew that she was not who she was saying she was supposed to be, so it had that kind of like uncanny feeling to me.
The performance of Madeline Brewer was really varied and crazy, because she went from this fake Lola to the real Lola, and then we got to see her self with her family as Alice Ackerman. And at first, the performance felt really disjointed to me. It didn't seem well acted. I was a bit confused with her personality shifts, but then her performance really did grow on me as the movie went on, and I realized what she was doing to separate each of the characters, and I thought it was phenomenal. And it was scary because, I mean, if you have a doppelganger, at the very least you'd want that doppelganger to be a worse version of yourself, but this new Lola was an even better version of herself because she was climbing the ranks faster and higher. So, I mean, that would burn some egos. It would burn my ego if my doppelganger utilized what I already had and made it myself better.
She had another, also, now that I'm thinking about it, like version of herself too, with like the way that she interacted with people who were not her family, like her friends who are also cam girls, or when she eventually has to interact with some of the men in real life that she talks to online. And really, I feel like in the end, it was kind of interesting to see all of these come together into one person. Like she wasn't necessarily compartmentalizing all of these portions of herself anymore. It was just one person, even though she still maintained having a second identity online as well. So next, I would like to talk about horror as a genre being a means for talking about political issues, and also just how we felt generally about this movie portraying sex work in the way that it did and what we felt about that representation. So there's a lot of movies out there that are horror movies and also political movies, or that touch on social issues. Some of the big ones are things like Get Out, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Godzilla. I mean, the list goes on and on. I would venture to say a lot of horror movies are actually talking about real life horrors that we deal with every day. What are your like general feelings about that, Ryan? Do you like horror movies as a means for discussing real world issues?
I do. I think the genre of horror is innately connected to like whatever the zeitgeist of fear is. So you think back to Psycho, and there's like the deep ingrained fear of feminine men or trans people, and that makes it into the movie. And that's just what America is afraid of at the time. So even if it's not a political movie, just the idea of what people are afraid of is itself political.
I totally agree, which reminds me of this essay that I read quite a long time ago, or I guess not that long ago, in my undergrad, that I kind of reflected back on while preparing for this podcast, which is called The Imagination of Disaster by Susan Sontag. And in this, it really is looking at how people use science fiction as both as a means of like escape from their daily life, but also maybe like coping with daily life as well, which I think is definitely what like horror is often really about.
Yeah, and especially like psychological horror in particular, which I think this probably most and foremost for me was more of a psychological kind of thriller, where you're forced to reconcile with your own shortcomings, your own kind of walls to get past. But yeah, I agree. I really like exploring horror as a valid genre and not just a slasher. And I think like people are really coming around to it, and we see more and more movies come out like Get Out, like Body Snatchers, which there was a remake, so I mean like reinventions of old ideas as well, to just really take advantage of horror's offerings and bring it to the modern light.
And I think that the obvious like main political or social issue that this movie deals on is sex work in general, and like what it is to be a cam girl and to live that life. What did you kind of feel about how this movie was representing that, Ryan?
I don't know. I really tried to think about that. I really did. And my brain just didn't want to think too deeply about it, to be honest with you. I really don't know. I really didn't think too deeply about why it chose sex work as its genre, because it easily could have been like a vlogger or someone who streams on Twitch. And I think it might have been the same movie for me. So I'm really trying to grapple with why they chose a cam girl. I mean, the person who wrote the film was a cam girl herself. So, I mean, there's that obvious reason. But I cannot pinpoint why it all lines up to equal this message.
I think that, at least from my perspective as a non-sex worker, that it seemed pretty good maybe with the representation. I think that the elements of it that really made the movie also about that were the other like interactions with people that Lola had in her real life. So for instance, like her interactions with her family and her being afraid of her mom finding out what she did, because she didn't want her mom to know until she had reached a certain level of fame essentially on this website. I would have liked to see that fear maybe played up a little bit more, just to see more of that psychology. But I think that that was maybe one of the elements of why it was specific to her being a sex worker. Also her interactions with the police that very briefly happened when she's just really like exasperated with the situation. She doesn't know what else to do with her account being hacked. She calls the police and they come to her house, and they, one, don't take her seriously, and then two, they like question her on whether or not what she's doing is illegal, and then three, dismiss her and say that she just needs to like deal with her own problems. essentially.
Yeah, that felt a little heavy-handed to me. Like, I know that probably, like, not even out of the question for what could happen in real life at all. But I was like, at first they were handling it kind of subtly. They were like, and do you take money for, like, these sexual acts? And I'm like, oh. And then, like, the one cop left and the other guy was like, oh, it's too bad you don't sleep with your customers. Like, take that as a compliment. And I was like, seemed a little heavy-handed. But I don't know. That part just, like, seemed kind of out of the movie for me. And, like, they were like, we need to make this statement, and that's the statement that we're going to make, and then we're done with it. And that feeling did not, like, that scene could have not been there, and it would have been the same movie for me.
I agree. I think that I would have liked them either to expand upon that more or maybe not have it, although I think it was important to include that. Otherwise, people might be wondering, like, why isn't she going to the police, or why isn't she, like, seeking help in different ways? But I know that that's a very real, like, issue that faces sex workers, of not being able to seek help because of it being illegal in most places. But I did like that it wasn't like that was what the movie was all about. Like, it wasn't just about a sex worker having a hard time with what she was trying to do. Like, it wasn't like, obviously she was having a hard time with her identity being stolen, but it was also just like normalized in a way, like apart from her interactions with her family, like her interactions with her friends that she had, like that was just like normal and okay.
And with her brother too. I really was surprised about that one. And, you know, I really do believe that she had the intention of telling her mom, and it probably would have been like kind of weird and awkward at first, but her mom was eventually accepting. And I didn't understand why her brother, like, got really mad at her in the middle of the film when she was looking for help. Because her brother, at this party that they were at, was trying to initially protect her because their friends were watching her stream, or her doppelganger stream. And then her brother, like, turned his back on her in her most desperate need reach out. And I was very confused about that. But you still have not answered my question. Why did they choose the cam girl and not, like, a vlogger or something less controversial, I guess, more relatable? Why? Other than the sex horror, I can't think of anything else that would have changed in the movie.
Well, and then the other thing that I think was specific to it was also just her interaction with, like, men, like the men that she met in real life that she had talked to online. I mean, those interactions arguably just could have been faced by any woman, probably, unfortunately. But I mean, it made sense also for that to happen in the movie. I mean, why was it just a cam girl at all in general? I mean, again, I think the obvious reason is just that the writer who made it was writing it loosely on her own experiences. And I think that camming is something that is, like, increased in popularity and interest over the past years, especially at this current point in time, which we'll get into a little bit more later. But I think that that's probably just why. I don't know. As soon as I heard what it was about, I was deeply interested, just because I feel like that's, like, a world that I'm pretty fascinated by. So to me, I feel like I was, like, the demographic who would immediately be interested in that, and maybe more interested in that versus, like, a vlogger or
me too,
something else.
I was also very hooked by the premise, but when I watch a movie now, especially a horror movie, I expect perfect escalation. Do you know what I mean?
I think so, but why don't you elaborate anyways?
Sure. Like, I expect it to start, like, from here, like, from the bottom, and then slowly kind of work its way up, and then sharply increase at the end. That's kind of the perfect escalation I expect from a horror movie. You kind of see everything folding out, and you kind of see everything coming until the end, when, like, oh my goodness, of course it was that, but oh, it wasn't that, whether it's someone dies, or someone dies in an unexpected way, or some weird kind of horror twist, or what have you. And everything lines up with the theming of the movie, with the dialogue, with everything that was presented. And with this one, I did not get that perfect escalation. I really did not. Not all the chakras did not align for me in this movie. Some of it felt kind of just like they were there because they were just put there, just without thought. And the selection of having it be a cam girl, like, this setting did not align for me. It was a little bit off.
What do you think would have made it better then? Like, what would have aligned your chakras?
I think if they had put more emphasis on her real world interactions as a sex worker and made the outside world like kind of horrific as well, maybe, or a different kind of parallel to the cam girl world. Between the two worlds, I wasn't getting that perfect kind of parallel between Alice Ackerman and Lola_Lola. It didn't line up for me. It really didn't.
I agree. I definitely think they could have done more, but I also liked how it just felt kind of normalizing, I guess. Like, it felt kind of normalizing for cam work and made it feel like, I guess I kind of liked that maybe it didn't necessarily have to be camming. Like, it could happen to anybody, and with that, like, it didn't feel like it was taking any particular point of view on the morality of camming or anything like that. Like, it just felt like this is what it is. This is just her job. And albeit she did have problems specific to that job that they could have elaborated on more, but in a way, I kind of like that maybe they didn't do that. I don't know.
They could have even normalized it more. They could have already had her mom and brother know about it. And, they could still have that scene with the cops, like I said, give or take on that scene. Just her normal Alice Ackerman life was so uncompelling. And every time we were spending time with Alice, I was kind of bored. And the movie in the middle kind of like flatlined for me because she was spending so much time as Alice Ackerman trying to get her identity back that I just wanted to spend more time with Lola. And I don't know, it really flatlined for me. I feel like they were trying to show like a double kind of life as herself as Lola versus Alice, and it wasn't done successfully. And at the end, the movie did not escalate right for me. And that's where I am sitting right now. And I do think it all kind of comes back to the conception of the movie, which starts with the premise of a cam girl with identity stolen. I think that's where it sits.
Kind of moving on from that, the other thing that I think might be interesting to discuss that we kind of already touched on is the idea that maybe this movie is a commentary on the extreme desires of others and what maybe people feel like pushed to do or happens to them. In the movie, Lola is seen in the very beginning during doing one of her cam shows where she pretends to slice open her throat in order to get more views on her videos. And then it just kind of escalates from there to where her doppelganger pretends to shoot herself in the head. And she's kind of known for doing these like really extreme shows. This does obviously happen in real life with pretty brutal things that people will do or ask others to do in real life. In 2019, a woman who was camming live with a man online, he paid her to essentially pretend to suffocate herself, and she did in fact die from asphyxiation from that happening. So these extreme things definitely do happen. I didn't necessarily feel like the movie was like trying that hard to make a statement on this particular topic, but I do think that it was there.
Yeah, I think so too. It makes perfect sense to me that would happen, and that was perfectly escalated for me. Like in the first kind of opening shot, we start with just like the cam footage of her going through her show and really shining, and escalating to that throat slit, and then her doppelganger Lola takes it even further, and you see how she kind of improves on the formula when she shoots herself, fake shoots herself, or maybe even real shoots herself, because she could be an AI, I don't know, in the head.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting to see like the progression and how that is what gets her to be more and more popular on this website. Like more and more men just want to come and see what kind of crazy shit she's doing online. And I don't know. I don't really want to make any assertions about what that means about people or society.
Another strange, underdeveloped theme in the movie. There was just a lot of pieces. Like that one part where that one girl was like, Princess was like, I'll take off my shirt if Lola drops 10 ranks, and like kind of like the girl hate community, that was really underdeveloped. Just another thing to add to the list for me.
The last thing that I would like to touch on in this discussion about cam is really the rise of camming during the pandemic of 2020, 2021, indefinite times. If you are on social media, more than likely you have seen this happen. I have seen people on like my Instagram feed who were not sex workers prior to the pandemic, but due to, I think, a combination of factors, have become sex workers or cam people during the pandemic. Specifically on OnlyFans. OnlyFans really took off along with the pandemic and kind of rode those coattails, which I just think is really interesting to see play out. I think that this has happened for a combination of reasons, of people losing their job, needing to find a new job, and then people feeling alone, people not having like physical touch from people anymore if they're in isolation and quarantine in their homes.
Yeah, no, people being bored. I mean, I don't know if you've ever considered sex work, Savanah, but I feel like it's definitely been, like, I've Googled it before, you know, like just to see. Like, it can't help but pop into your mind because you have this perception of sex workers being in front of a camera, like easy money. But cam, one thing it really does well, I think, is showing how difficult it is to be a sex worker, to have that insane schedule, to always be thinking of new show ideas, and to be one-upping everyone else around you who's also quite smart and coming up with new and inventive show ideas too. So I do think that is one thing that cam discouraged me to do, because it does not look easy at all.
Yeah, no, I definitely think I've seen also through like Google searches and on this movie that it definitely is not as easy. I think if they wanted to push that, they could have shown more of the other real life problems that she probably would have faced as well. There's a really good documentary on Hulu that I watched recently that I think is made by like ABC News, and it's called OnlyFans Selling Sexy, and it particularly follows some people who got on OnlyFans during the pandemic and their journey with that. So it's definitely really interesting, and for me, it's just been a different experience, I guess, seeing some people that I know in real life go to a platform like OnlyFans and then having not a different perception of them, but just like seeing a different side of them that I never would have thought that I would have seen before, which is interesting. And OnlyFans itself has some major issues as a platform. But I think that the more that sex work in this way is normalized, I can only think that that's going to be good and hopefully lead to decriminalization of things one day, eventually.
Eventually, hopefully, we'll get there.
All right, so kind of final thoughts, Ryan. I know I'm kind of unclear on your standing on this movie about whether or not you generally liked it, kind of what you walked away with feeling like after this movie.
I think I was mostly, I enjoyed my time with it. I think I had a fun ride with it. But overall, I was frustrated by a lot of the underdeveloped plot lines and the conceit of the movie, like I mentioned. And it did not perfectly escalate for me. If I said I liked it, I would unfollow one of Lola's rules, and I would have faked my orgasm because I did not get there at the end. I really did not. Speaking of which, what about that ending? What do you make of it? That's kind of where the whole movie led up to, is that fight between herself and this fake Lola, and then her being a different person to go on to cam. I think there's a lot to potentially unpack there. I kind of give my spin on it, but like, I don't know what you thought of the ending. I think someone could come away with that ending with completely different things. It left it very open.
So first off, what I liked about the ending was that she didn't stop camming. I really liked that it wasn't like that was what the problem was. Like I said earlier, it wasn't like a question of morality or anything like that. I felt like, I don't know, it was kind of, I guess I felt conflicted about her like having this new persona, because it was while she was like kind of blending all these portions of herself finally together in the end, she was still having another persona. But I mean, like realistically, that's just what would have to happen. With the like final fight at the end, I feel like in my mind of it being like a deep fake situation, like I imagine it to be like, I don't know, exposed essentially. So that's why she wins in a way. But really, I think that she, I guess, maybe is seeing like some limits, I guess, that she has like come across, or not necessarily like limits of what she wants to do, but like limits on how she wants to like live her life and interact with people in a way. Or not even limits, just like a changing of how she wants to do things. Overall, I liked the movie. I am usually a sucker for things that are like visual in some way, so I really loved like her whole setup that she had like in her camming room. Like that's like one of my favorite aesthetics, like the pink neon kind of stuff. So from that perspective, I really liked it. I was drawn in by the premise, like I said. I always get a kick out of movies that are set in Phoenix. This movie was set in Phoenix, which I was kind of amused by. But overall, I liked it. I think that Madeline Brewer is a really great actress. I really like her in The Handmaid's Tale also. Yeah, so I enjoyed it.
Her performance was my favorite part. Definitely some good pieces of sushi to pick off this platter, but for me overall, not completely worth the purchase of the whole platter. Even though it's free, it's on Netflix. I mean, like, you could just watch it. It's fine. It was a fun hour and a half. It was only an hour and a half. So
Netflix isn't free, though.
It is for a lot of people. I don't pay for Netflix. Do you?
This is true. I don't pay for Netflix, but somebody pays for my Netflix. So there you go. 2 different perspectives on whether or not people might recommend it to you.
I just got one thing to say to you. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, well. That's what I got to say. If I were really good, I would have had like fake blood and stuff, but I'm not that good.
Well, then we would get demonetized if we were monetized. Thank you everybody for hanging out with us today. Like we said in the beginning, we are still doing our Pokemon card giveaway. If you would like to participate in this giveaway, all you have to do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Instagram. Screenshot those 3 things and then DM us your screenshots with your mailing address, and we will send you a personalized Pokemon card that represents your true aura. If you're not an Instagram person, you can also just do the Apple Podcasts and YouTube portions of the giveaway and not worry about the Instagram one, and you can email us. Our email is in our description down below.
Thank you so much for listening to us this week. Let us know what your thoughts are on the movie Cam. I am very interested if you've seen it. And until then, see you next Tuesday. Bye!
Bye.
Okay, there's also like a weird sound coming out. Can you hear something?
No. Oh wait, maybe I can. It almost sounds like a heartbeat.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing too.
Are we in a movie now? Are we next? We're internet personalities now, Ryan.